like the King Dakar roller coaster that reaches never-before-seen heights, that comes crashing down within mere moments. The Jewish people, with this tragic story that's told in our parsha, where they are standing mountainside, their holy leader Moshe Rabbeinu is receiving the luchos up in heaven, and now, before he returns, Hashem gives him the message that the Jewish people down below are dancing around a golden calf. Avodah Zarah, idolatry, right there in Hashem's house. Right there, mountainside. How is this possible? Which errors precipitated this tragic, calamitous event? An event that Chazal teach us we are still suffering from Bezman Hazeh. In this Torah podcast, with God's help, we're going to explore which lessons can we take from the Egel HaZahav to protect ourselves for, God forbid, not falling into similar traps. Rav Dessler writes in Mechta Me'Eliyahu, in his fifth chelek, the fifth volume of Mechta Me'Eliyahu, on page 291, that his teacher, Rav Tzvi Hirsch Broide of blessed memory, told him in the name of Yisrael Salanter that this episode is a classic example of how we ourselves strengthen the hands of the Satan and enable him to increase the severity of our tests step by step. Without further ado, let us present, with God's help, one valuable takeaway to help protect ourselves from similar errors. To set the scene, it is now the 7th of Sivan, Moshe Rabbeinu's parting words to the Jewish people: I will be back in 40 days. 40 full days. The error happened right then and there. The Jewish people thought that the day that Moshe ascended the mountain was included in the counting. However, it was 40 full days, and therefore, while they were sitting there on the 16th of Tammuz expecting his arrival, to no avail. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't supposed to come down until the 17th of Tammuz. So it was on the 16th day of Tammuz, at about midday, when the Jewish people saw no signs of Moshe. The Pasuk tells us, Parshas, ki Sisa, Perek, Lamed Beis, Pasuk, Aleph, Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe lo redes min hahar. The people saw that Moses delayed in descending the mountain. Things begin to deteriorate. The nation gathers around Aaron. They conspire to build this Egel HaZahav to replace Moshe. On this pasuk, Rashi explains to us that this is kind of an odd word, boshesh. What does that mean? Citing Onkelos, it means lashon ichor, an expression of lateness. Moshe, we don't see him. He's delayed. Where is he? Fear is setting into the Jewish people. What if? Where is he? Is he coming back? At that moment, says Rashi, the Hera demus choshech va'afela ve'erbuvya. The Satan came and displayed an image of darkness, of gloom, and of confusion. Lomar telling the Jewish people, Vadai meis Moshe, that Moses is dead. Lokach ba'erbuvya la'olam. That is why confusion has come to the world. After this uncertainty, this uneasiness, the Satan came and really mixed them up, showing darkness, making illusions of Moshe actually being inside of a coffin, being carried about in heaven. So it now makes a little bit of sense as to where the mistake happened. But there's something to notice in this downfall. The speedy, precipitous downfall was step by step. It was gradual. First, at that point, the Satan came and confused the world. Then he showed them an appearance of thick darkness and confusion at the mountaintop. Then after that, Moshe must have died, they said. This would account for all the confusion. And only after that did then the Satan have permission to come and say that Moshe is indeed dead. And lastly, then he showed them the appearance of Moshe in a coffin being carried through the heavens. The Satan is an angel. The Satan is created by Hashem to fulfill his purpose in the world that God has created him, to cause difficulties, to cause temptations, to create tests for people in order to challenge them, to bring out the best in them. But he doesn't have free reign I often think about this. Does he have permission to come when I'm in the middle of studying or trying to pay attention to a shiur to give me a stomachache that prevents me from learning? He doesn't have free reign like that. But what he does have is the ability to create small challenges, to create fair, just nisyonos. And each level of the test, at each stage, the test, if one fails, becomes more intensive than the previous one. We see this clearly in the Rashi. The entire commencement of the downfall was first a feeling of an unrest, of uneasiness, a little bit of a what if. And then the idea begins to set in. Rav Dessler explains that the proper response, a response of really most of the nation, for we're taught that it was really only a couple thousand people out of the entire 600,000 that were involved in this grave error. The proper response was to say, this is Moshe Rabbeinu, the Raya Ne'eman. He's coming down. He told us, is it possible perhaps that we made a mistake? We erred in our calculations? But the way of the Satan, but the permission that he is granted from God to test us is dependent upon one's initial win or loss. If one says, Satan, this isn't true. I know Moshe Rabbeinu's going to come down. Well, then the whole thing will melt away. His grasp upon us becomes much more weak. However, since they did not make the correct deduction, they allowed this spirit of unrest, of uneasiness to enter to their hearts. So now the Satan has permission to increase the test. And he showed them in their imagination darkness, confusion, and Moshe even in a coffin. The Satan is allowed to give us bait, to give us a level 1 challenge. And if we fail, only then is he allowed to go up and increase the challenges, to make them level 2, to make them even harder and harder. And there's no greater example than Paro in Mitzrayim, when originally he was given an opportunity, a choice. He had bechira to let the Jewish people go. And ultimately, after so many bad decisions, after so many times taking back his yes, reverting back, going into being mechazik his heart, saying, no, I will not let you go. He succumbed so greatly, he fell so far, that he ultimately, according to many opinions, even lost his free will. Libi oimerli, my heart tells me that there's no greater example of this than when we arise in the morning, when our alarm goes off. We have that opportunity to press the snooze button or to bundle that blanket up, throw it across the room, and then get out of bed. This vort really comes to life then. For if a person tarries, if he delays, if he says 5 more minutes, it really increases his Satan, his Yetzer Hara's grasp upon him. He gives in a little bit, but it's at the very beginning that grants the Satan that much more power to increase the challenge. Really, this is not a depressing vort. It's inspiring. Rav Dessler tells us that if we can strengthen ourselves at that first second, while he's still much less powerful, much less intense than what it will become, we can escape. If the response is, I know Moshe Rabbeinu's coming down that mountain, I'm not pressing that snooze button, I'm going to get out of bed, then you're weakening the Satan, the evil inclinations grasp upon you. Sometimes I think in certain nisyonos that I will be faced with, well, Hashem, how is this fair? How can I be put in such a position? How can the Satan have so much strength over me? I believe that we found the answer. It also seems rather unfair that the Satan could conjure up a picture of Moshe's Levaya, Moshe being inside of a coffin, being brought around heaven, clearly being depicted as dead. How is that fair? The truth is that it's gradual, small weaknesses that amount up to build the Satan into something so strong. A little bit of doubt, a little bit of uncertainty, a small amount of laziness, a 5-minute snooze could power him to a spot that almost seems unfair. The chizuk is, the motivation is, the vort is, that when we win at the beginning, that right at tip-off, we make the right call, we keep him at bay. This grave, tragic, calamitous, horrible episode could have been prevented if the Jewish people would have immediately bought into their trust. If they would have said, that's craziness. We know Moshe Rabbeinu is going to come down that mountain. When we remain strong, when we are resolute on his early attacks, when we show bravery, when we move on from those first thoughts of sin, enduring, battling those initial feelings that the Satan will throw our way, that we can emerge victorious. It is there that we can weaken his grasp upon us. The golden calf, the Egel Azahav, precipitated by one small feeling of uncertainty, a what if that was built up by the Satan to something so much more, could have been prevented with early strength. Seize those early opportunities. Instead of hitting the snooze button, unplug that alarm clock, throw it across the room, for it is there that battle, that our battles may be won or lost.